You sit alone, hoping to feel something solid, something that tells you who you are. You scroll through ideas online. You hear phrases like, be your best self, or discover your true purpose. You try them on like clothes that never quite fit. The more you chase clarity, the more confused you feel. It's not that you're doing it wrong. It's that the process of finding yourself doesn't always start with knowing. It often starts with not knowing. You try to define yourself through jobs, relationships, hobbies. You make lists. You ask big questions. What do I want? Who am I? But each answer only leads to more questions. It feels like walking through fog. The harder you strain to see, the more the fog thickens. That can make you think you've failed, but it's actually a sign you're getting closer to something real. Getting lost strips away assumptions. You notice what you miss and what you don't. You learn through contrast. Imagine moving to a new city where no one knows your name. You feel unsteady without the labels you wore back home. At first, you may want to cling to anything familiar, but in that space where no one expects you to be anything, you get a chance to move without a script. You start doing things not because they match your identity, but because they feel honest. That's how you begin to find a thread worth following. Not one you search for, but one you stumble into. You may believe that being authentic means expressing who you are, but often the self you show is built from ideas you've picked up along the way. Maybe you were told you're the quiet one, the smart one, the responsible one. You carry these roles until they feel like facts. You make choices based on them. You avoid some risks and take others. Over time, those ideas shape your behavior, and you start to believe that's who you really are. But real authenticity doesn't come from building up an image. It comes from peeling it back. Letting go of who you think you're supposed to be is where the work begins. That's uncomfortable. It can feel like you're losing something important. But what you're losing is often a story that kept you limited. When you let go of it, you're not left with nothing. You're left with space, room to notice what feels real and what doesn't. Picture someone who's always been told they're the planner. Friends rely on them to organize, to stay ahead. They lean into that role and take pride in it. But maybe they start to notice a tightness in their chest before every gathering. Maybe they don't enjoy planning as much as they think they should. If they step back, even once, and choose to let someone else take the lead, they might feel exposed. But they also might feel relief. That gap between who they are and who they think they need to be is where authenticity starts to take root. You might think that improving yourself means fixing what's broken. You spot what you don't like, short temper, poor time management, fear of failure, and try to push it away. You focus on discipline, self-control, and setting goals. But when you start from rejection, your efforts often fall apart. You end up stuck in a cycle of trying to erase parts of yourself instead of working with them. Growth doesn't begin with change. It begins with recognition. You have to see the flaw for what it is without flinching. If you get defensive or ashamed, you miss the point. A flaw isn't a final judgment, it's just a signpost. It tells you something about how you cope, how you think, or what you avoid. Think about someone who interrupts others in conversation. They might not mean to, but they do it often. At first, they deny it, then they justify it. I just get excited, they say. But if they stop and pay attention, not to the excuse, but to the habit itself, they may see a deeper pattern. Maybe they fear not being heard. Maybe they rush to speak so they won't be overlooked. Accepting that doesn't mean they're okay with it. It just means they're being honest. And from there, they can choose to pause before speaking. Not to fake politeness, but to practice awareness. You don't get better by pretending you're already fine. You grow by sitting with what's hard to face and deciding to carry it with care, not shame. You might think your thoughts define you. If you feel anxious, you believe you're an anxious person. If you think you're not good enough, you believe that's the truth. But thoughts come and go. They rise out of habit, memory, fear, or stress. Some feel true because they're loud. Others feel true because they're familiar. But feeling real doesn't make something real. You can't control which thoughts show up. You don't choose to think, I'm going to fail, any more than you choose to feel hunger or fatigue. A thought is just an event in the mind. It passes through like weather. You can notice it, even name it, without grabbing on. Picture someone preparing for a job interview. As the day gets closer, a voice in their head says, "You're going to mess this up." They feel their stomach tighten. The thought loops. They try to fight it, argue with it, block it out. But none of that helps. What might help is something simpler. That's a worry thought. It's not a fact. That small shift, creating space between the person and the thought, can change how they move forward. They don't have to silence the voice. They just don't have to follow it. You are not your thoughts. You're the one who hears them. The part of you that can watch, pause, and choose. That's where identity begins. Not with what your mind says, but with how you meet it. Let the thought pass and watch what stays. That's you. Most people treat identity like something fixed. You're told to just be yourself, as if who you are is already complete and waiting to be uncovered. But identity isn't fixed. It's built, tested, and reshaped over time. You don't find out who you are by staying the same. You find out by changing and seeing what sticks. Change doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like failure. You try something new, you feel out of place, you second-guess yourself. That's part of it. When you leave behind an old habit or belief, it can feel like you're losing part of yourself. But often, that part was never fully yours. It was something borrowed, a role you played to keep the peace, to feel safe, or to make sense of things. Letting go of that doesn't make you less yourself. It clears space for something more real to take its place. Imagine someone who's always been known as the reliable one. They don't cancel plans. They never miss a deadline. People lean on them, and they've learned to measure their worth by how dependable they are. One day, they realize they're exhausted. They say no to a request, and it rattles them. But then they notice something else. They don't feel resentful for once. They feel clear. That small change doesn't make them less reliable. It makes them more honest. And in that shift, something truer shows up. Change doesn't erase who you are. It shows you who you were never meant to be. The ego wants to win. It wants to be seen, praised, remembered. It chases success because it thinks success will prove something: worth, value, importance. But the more you listen to that voice, the harder it becomes to do anything well. The ego makes you self-conscious. It keeps you focused on the outcome, not the process. It cares more about looking good than getting better. When you're driven by ego, you're not open. You avoid feedback. You fear mistakes. You want control. That pressure builds, and it makes real growth harder. You can't learn if you're afraid of looking like a beginner. You can't connect with others if you're always trying to be impressive. Picture someone who wants to write a book. They imagine it on a shelf, their name on the cover, interviews, attention. They sit down to write, but nothing flows. Every sentence feels forced. That's not a lack of talent. That's the ego in the way. The ego wants the reward without the risk. It wants the image, not the work. Now imagine they put that aside. They stop thinking about the finished product. They write just to understand their own thoughts. They write badly on purpose, just to see what's underneath. Something opens up. The writing improves, not because they tried harder, but because they got out of the way. Greatness doesn't come from trying to be great. It comes from showing up fully, doing the work, and letting the outcome be whatever it is. The ego can't do that, but you can. Freedom sounds like doing what you want when you want. No rules, no pressure, no schedule. But that version of freedom wears off fast. If you eat whatever you feel like, skip work whenever it's hard, or wait until you're motivated, you end up stuck. Your body slows down, your tasks pile up, and your choices shrink. What looked like freedom starts to feel like chaos. Real freedom works differently. It comes from structure. When you choose discipline, you create room to move. You build habits that support you. You do the work before it becomes urgent. You keep promises to yourself, even small ones, and that builds trust. You don't wait to feel ready. You act, and readiness follows. Think of someone learning to play guitar. At first, they just want to jam, make noise, have fun, but their fingers stumble. The notes sound off. If they want to get good, they need to repeat scales, practice slowly, and show up even when it's dull. That's discipline. Over time, their fingers move without thinking. They don't have to look down. They're free to play anything they hear in their head. What seemed like limitation became possibility. The same applies to everything. Writing, fitness, focus, even relationships. When you show up consistently, when you do the work no one sees, you get access to things others don't. You're not controlled by urges or distractions. You're steady. That's the kind of freedom you can rely on. Not because it's easy, but because it's earned. Most people treat identity like something solid. You pick a few traits, roles, or labels and wear them like a name tag. You say, I'm a teacher, or I'm a creative, or I'm someone who's always calm. It feels safe to know who you are. But the truth is, identity changes. It shifts with age, experience, and environment. What fit you 5 years ago might feel like a costume today. You might not notice the shift right away. It often shows up as discomfort. You feel stuck. You go through the motions, but something feels off. That's usually a sign the identity you're clinging to has outlived its use. It served a purpose, but it's not you, not fully. Letting go feels risky. If you're not this version of yourself, who are you? But that fear is part of the process. Imagine someone who always identified as the strong one in their family. They fix things, support others, never ask for help. It gives them a sense of value. But over time, they feel drained. They want to step back, to admit they're tired, but the role won't let them until they drop it. They say, I don't have it in me today. It feels like failure. Then it feels like truth. In that space, they don't vanish. Something quieter steps forward. Not the role, not the performance, just the person underneath. Identity is a tool, not a foundation. You use it until it breaks. When it breaks, you find what doesn't. That's your essence. It doesn't need a name tag. It just needs space. You notice yourself thinking. You catch your own reactions. You hear a sharp tone come out of your mouth and think, why did I say it like that? You feel fear rise in your chest before speaking up and watch it happen without stopping it. There's a part of you that acts and a part of you that watches. Most of the time, you live in the action. But the part that watches, that's worth paying attention to. The observer doesn't judge. It doesn't push or pull. It just sees. It notices the anger behind your words, the doubt behind your silence, the grasping behind your ambition. This isn't some mystical idea. You've experienced it. When you feel regret, it's because you've stepped back and seen your own behavior from a wider view. When you feel growth, it's often because you've stayed aware in the middle of discomfort. Imagine someone getting defensive in a conversation. Their voice tightens. They cross their arms. But inside, they know it's happening. They don't stop themselves, but they see it. That moment of noticing is the split. Part of them is locked in the habit. The other part is awake. That awareness is the start of something different. Next time it might arrive earlier, maybe just before they speak, maybe right after the first thought. That's how change begins. Not by forcing a new response, but by watching the old one play out without lying to yourself. You are both the one who reacts and the one who sees the reaction. The more you notice that gap, the more clearly you live. Everyone wants to stand out. You want to feel like you matter, like you're different in a way that means something. So you try to be interesting. You chase achievements, tell better stories, post the right pictures. You look for the thing that makes you special. But in trying to be special, you often end up blending in, because the chase looks the same on everyone. It comes from the same place, wanting to be seen, wanting to prove you're enough. What actually stands out is honesty. And honesty lives in the ordinary parts of life, the things most people skip past because they don't seem big enough. But those are the moments that show who you are. Making your kid laugh when no one's watching. Owning a mistake without explaining it away. Cleaning up after someone else, not for praise, but because it needed to be done. These things don't draw attention, but they draw people in. Picture someone at a dinner table who doesn't try to dominate the room. They listen. They laugh when something's funny, not to fill space. They speak when they have something real to say. Later, you remember them, not because they stood out on purpose, but because they didn't. When you stop trying to be different, what's real about you shows up, and no one else can copy that. You become unique, not by effort, but by presence. The details of your life, your voice, your timing, your way of seeing, are already one of a kind. You don't need to force it. You just need to stop covering it up. At the beginning, knowing feels clear. You read something new, and it fills a gap. You answer a question you didn't know how to ask before. That feels good. It builds a sense of certainty. But the deeper you go, the more the ground shifts. What once seemed simple now has layers. Every new fact opens the door to 5 more. The more you know, the more you see what's still unknown. This shows up in small ways. You start learning a language. At first, you pick up greetings, numbers, and basic phrases. You feel progress. Then you try to follow a real conversation. It's fast, full of slang, full of tone and rhythm you didn't expect. You freeze. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you're learning for real now. The same thing happens in any skill. A beginner in design learns how to use a tool. They copy the look of something polished. It works. Then they try to make something original. Now they have to make decisions about shape, color, spacing. They realize they don't know why anything works. That's when the real learning begins. The danger comes when you stop at the first layer. When you think understanding the surface is enough. It's not. Depth takes time. It takes sitting with not knowing and not turning away from it. People who know a lot don't speak in absolutes. They ask better questions. They admit when they don't know. Not because they're unsure, but because they've seen how wide the field really is. You think you understand something until you try to explain it. In your head, it feels solid. You've read the book, watched the video, maybe even taken notes. But when someone asks you to walk them through it, your mind jumps around. You forget a step. You realize you don't know why something works, only that it does. That gap is where the real learning happens. Teaching forces clarity. You have to break things down. You can't hide behind vague ideas or half-formed logic. You have to speak plainly. That means you have to understand plainly. If your explanation is confusing, it's not just their problem, it's your signal to go deeper. Picture someone helping a friend with basic math. They know how to do the problem, but when asked why they move the decimal or carry the 1, they freeze. They've always just done it. Now, to help the other person, they have to stop and think. They have to go back and look at the concept from the ground up. That effort deepens their own understanding, not because they studied harder, but because they had to make the idea work for someone else. This doesn't only apply to classrooms. Anytime you share what you know, you sharpen it. You see what's missing. You make new connections. You expose the weak spots, and you fix them, not by reading more, but by explaining better. Teaching isn't something you do after you've mastered something. It's part of how you master it. Growth doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like losing control. You feel things slipping, old routines, certain thoughts, a sense of who you were. It can feel like something's wrong, but that breaking is often the start of something right. You hold on to patterns because they've helped you survive. They gave you structure, a role, a way to get through. But what helps you survive doesn't always help you grow. At some point, the structure starts to crack. Maybe you stop enjoying things that used to excite you. Maybe you notice anger where you used to feel numb. Maybe you stop saying yes to things just to keep the peace. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels messy. But underneath the mess, something honest is trying to surface. Picture someone who's always been known as the dependable one. They carry others' weight, show up early, stay quiet when upset. One day they can't do it anymore. They miss a deadline. They say no to a request. Guilt rushes in. They wonder if they're falling apart. What's really happening is a shift. They're letting go of a version of themselves that no longer fits. It's not clean. It doesn't feel brave, but it's real. When something breaks, your first instinct might be to fix it fast, to patch it up and keep moving. But not everything that breaks needs to be repaired. Some things need to fall apart so you can see what's underneath. Growth often begins where you stop pretending everything's fine. Wisdom doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't rush in to correct, impress, or lead the room. It doesn't try to win arguments or fill silence. The wiser someone becomes, the more they understand how little needs to be said. They've seen how fast opinions change, how often people speak without listening, and how rarely certainty lasts. Someone who's just learned something new often wants to share it right away. They explain it in detail, defend it strongly, and feel sure they're right. That's part of learning. But over time, the need to speak fades. You still know the thing. You just don't need to prove it. Imagine someone in a meeting. Everyone talks over each other. They make points, defend their ideas, argue for attention. One person stays quiet. They listen, take in the tension, wait. Then they speak a single sentence that shifts the direction. Not because they wanted to be heard, but because they had something worth saying. That's wisdom at work. It doesn't show off. It shows up when needed. This doesn't mean silence equals wisdom. Some people stay quiet out of fear or doubt, but the silence that comes from wisdom isn't fear. It's choice. It's knowing when words would help and when they would just add noise. The more you know, the more you see how much can't be explained. You speak simply or not at all. Not because you have less to say, but because you've learned what matters most. And that doesn't always need to be said out loud. Learning starts with curiosity, but real learning often begins with unlearning. You carry old beliefs, assumptions, and habits that shape how you see the world. Some of them helped you. Others kept you safe. But not all of them are true. Not all of them still serve you. To take in something new, you sometimes have to make space by letting go of what's already there. This isn't always obvious. When you start learning something, you bring your old framework with you. That framework tells you how things work, what to expect, and what matters. But if it's flawed, it filters out what's useful. You think you're learning, but really, you're just reinforcing what you already believe. Imagine someone who's always been told that asking for help is weakness. They grow up solving problems on their own, staying quiet even when overwhelmed. Then they step into a job where collaboration matters. They struggle. Not because they lack skill, but because they've learned the wrong lesson. Before they can grow, they have to unlearn that belief. They have to accept that asking doesn't mean failing. That shift takes more effort than picking up a new tool or method. It challenges how they see themselves. This happens in simple things too. You might learn to drive on one side of the road, then move to a country where it's the opposite. You know how to drive, but now your instincts work against you. You have to unlearn your habits before the new ones take hold. Progress depends on more than adding new information. It depends on clearing out what no longer fits. Mastery is not about knowing everything. It's about realizing how much there is left to learn. When you first start with something, you focus on gaining the basics. You follow steps, take notes, and try to understand the core ideas. Over time, you start to improve, but real mastery doesn't stop at improvement. It pushes you to keep questioning, refining, and exploring. Imagine someone learning to play the guitar. At first, they struggle with simple chords, and every note feels like an effort. They practice the basics until they're comfortable. Then they move on to more advanced songs. They get faster, they get better. But after years of playing, they realize the next step isn't learning a new technique. It's returning to the basics and noticing what they missed. A tiny adjustment in finger placement can change everything. Mastery, in this case, means never thinking you've reached the end. The same applies to anything you want to master. Whether it's painting, writing, or cooking, you keep improving by continuing to study the fundamentals. The deeper you go, the more you realize how much you don't know. The more you grow, the more questions you ask. A person who has mastered their craft doesn't stop learning. They learn with intention. They see every challenge as an opportunity to learn something new. Mastery is not the end of the road. It's a journey that doesn't stop. It's about remaining curious and always refining your skills. The true test of understanding something is being able to explain it simply. When you first learn something, it can seem complicated. You get tangled up in terms, rules, or steps. You might even feel like you understand it, but the real measure comes when you can take all that complexity and make it clear to someone else. If you can break it down without using jargon or confusing details, then you've truly grasped it. Think about teaching a child how to tie their shoes. At first, the steps feel complex. You explain it in long, detailed sentences, but they don't quite get it. Then, as you simplify, you say, make an X with the laces, then tuck one lace under. Suddenly, it clicks. The more simply you explain it, the more you realize how well you understand it yourself. You're not leaving anything out, you're focusing on what matters. The same applies in other areas. A person who truly understands a concept can teach it without making it sound complicated. A good writer can take a complex idea and put it into clear, straightforward language. A good coach can explain a drill so anyone can do it, no matter their skill level. Simplicity doesn't mean oversimplifying. It means focusing on the core and stripping away what isn't needed. That's when you know you understand something deeply. Failure is often seen as a setback, something to avoid. But in reality, it's often the starting point for progress. When you try something new and fail, you're forced to see what doesn't work. That's valuable information. Failure shows you the gaps, the weaknesses, and the areas that need attention. It makes clear what needs to change in order for you to move forward. Take someone learning to play a sport. They practice a move over and over, but each time it's not quite right. They miss the target. They trip over their feet. At first, it feels like they're getting nowhere. But as they fail, they begin to notice the small mistakes. Maybe their form is wrong. Maybe they're not shifting their weight properly. Each failure teaches them something. Slowly, they adjust, fix their movements, and with each mistake, they get closer to success. This happens in work too. You try an approach that doesn't land. The pitch doesn't connect. The plan falls apart. But now, you have real data. You know what to adjust. You know where your assumptions were off. Progress doesn't happen without these moments. Without failure, there's nothing to improve. Failure is not the opposite of progress. It's part of it. It's a tool that guides you, pointing out where to focus, what to change, and how to get better. It forces you to re-examine your approach and find a better way forward. To grow, you often have to be willing to shrink. This might sound counterintuitive, but it's true. Growth doesn't always happen by expanding or pushing forward. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to step back, simplify, or let go. Think about a person trying to improve their fitness. They might push themselves harder at first, lifting heavier weights, running longer distances, but eventually, their progress slows down. They're hitting a wall. What they need now isn't more effort, but more focus. They need to shrink their routine down to the basics, focusing on form, breathing, and recovery. They might even need to take a step back and allow their body to rest. It's by shrinking their approach that they can rebuild with more strength and endurance. The same applies to learning. If you try to take on too much at once, you might end up overwhelmed, confused, and unable to retain anything. Instead of pushing for more information, you need to shrink your focus. Narrow down to one idea, one skill, and give it your full attention. By cutting out the excess, you make room for deeper understanding. In relationships too, shrinking can help. You might want to expand your circle, meet new people, and keep busy. But sometimes the best way to grow emotionally is to shrink your focus. Spend more time with a few close people. Simplify your commitments. It's in this smaller, quieter space that you can connect more deeply and grow in ways that matter. To change, you have to be willing to let go. The person you were, the identity you held on to, those things can hold you back. They were useful once. They helped you survive, fit in, or find comfort. But to become someone new, you have to step away from what you've built. You need space for something different. Think about someone who has always been the quiet one in the group. They're known for being reserved, the one who listens, stays in the background. Over time, that becomes their identity. They don't speak up much, don't take risks, and always keep their thoughts to themselves. But one day, they realize they're unhappy. They want to engage more, to share their ideas. The first step isn't just talking more. It's letting go of the label they've carried. It's stopping the story that says, "I'm the quiet one." Without releasing that, they stay stuck. This happens in work too. Someone might be comfortable in their current role, even though it doesn't excite them anymore. They stay because it's familiar, because they've been successful at it. But in order to grow, they have to let go of the comfort. They have to leave behind the identity of the person who's good at this job and step into something new. That space of uncertainty is where transformation happens. Only when you release the old version of yourself can you grow into who you're meant to be next. When you chase happiness, it slips further away. It's easy to think that if you just get the right job, the right relationship, or the right possession, joy will follow. But the more you chase it, the more it seems to run just out of reach. You think, if I just have this one thing, then I'll be happy. But after you get it, the happiness doesn't last. It fades, and you're left searching for the next thing. Take someone who works hard for a promotion. They push themselves, put in extra hours, and sacrifice personal time. They finally get the promotion, but soon enough, the excitement wears off. The new role comes with new pressures, more responsibility. The happiness they expected to feel doesn't last as long as they hoped. Now, they're looking at the next step, thinking that's the key to lasting happiness. The same thing happens in relationships. You might think that finding the perfect partner will bring you joy. But even when you're with someone great, joy doesn't come automatically. It requires effort, presence, and understanding. If you focus only on the idea of happiness, you miss the moments of connection and peace that build it. Chasing happiness creates a cycle that only leaves you more frustrated. It's not about reaching some final destination. It's about being present with what you have, accepting the ups and downs, and finding joy in the small, quiet moments. Peace comes not from changing everything around you, but from accepting what is. When you resist the reality of a situation, you create tension. You argue with what's happening. You wish for something different. That inner conflict steals your peace. But when you accept things as they are, even if they're not what you want, a calmness settles in. You no longer fight against the current, you flow with it. Imagine someone stuck in traffic. At first, they grip the steering wheel tightly, frustrated with every passing minute. They try to change the situation by speeding, weaving through lanes, even getting angry at other drivers. But nothing changes. The traffic is still there. When they finally accept it, when they let go of the need to control, they stop fighting. They take a deep breath. They might even listen to music or relax. The situation didn't change, but their response did. And that shift brought peace. The same happens in relationships. You might want someone to act differently, to change something about themselves. You try to force it, or you become upset when it doesn't happen. But if you accept them as they are, without trying to reshape them, peace follows. It doesn't mean you're giving up or agreeing with everything. It means you're choosing to let go of the need to control. Only then can you find space to truly connect without the weight of expectation. Gratitude is a quiet force. When you start recognizing the good in your life, it has a way of multiplying. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to notice. A simple thank you for a warm cup of coffee, a moment to appreciate the people around you, or taking a breath in a peaceful moment, these small acts of gratitude add up. The more you pay attention to what's good, the more you see. Consider someone walking through their day. They might feel frustrated, overwhelmed, or tired, but then they pause and notice something small. Maybe it's the sun shining through the window, or a colleague offering a kind word. That moment of appreciation doesn't just end there. It opens the door to more. They might notice how their work is moving forward, how their relationships are deepening, or how their body feels after a good night's sleep. Once you begin to recognize what's good, it doesn't stop. You start seeing more of it. Imagine a person going through a tough time. They're focused on what's missing, what's wrong, and what they wish was different. But if they can find something, anything, to be grateful for, a safe place to rest, a friend who listens, a job that pays the bills, they begin to shift. What once felt like a list of burdens becomes a list of things they can appreciate. Gratitude doesn't solve everything, but it opens up more space for the good things to grow. The more you give attention to what you have, the more it grows. The more you need love, the more distant it seems. When you chase it, it slips away. Love isn't something you can demand or control. It's something that grows naturally when you stop seeking it so desperately. Needing love comes from a place of insecurity. You look for it from others to fill a gap or to reassure you of your worth. But when you need it too much, it becomes a pressure, not a gift. Imagine someone who constantly seeks attention from their partner. They ask for constant validation, always wanting to be reassured that they are loved, wanted, and needed. The more they ask for this confirmation, the more distant their partner becomes. Not because the love is lacking, but because the constant need for validation creates tension. The partner feels pressured, and the more the person seeks it, the less they feel it in return. But when you stop needing love, when you stop relying on others to fill that space, something shifts. You give love freely without expectation. You start to appreciate the small, quiet moments, and you become open to receiving love in its natural form. Love no longer feels like something you must chase, but something that simply exists. And when you stop needing it, it shows up in ways you never expected, more freely and more fully. The less you grasp for it, the more love finds its way to you. When you try to control something, you only create distance. The tighter you hold on, the further it slips away. Whether it's a relationship, an idea, or a feeling, clinging to it doesn't bring you closer. In fact, it often pushes you further apart. Letting go, on the other hand, brings you closer. Think about someone holding on to a relationship out of fear. They constantly check in, ask for reassurance, and try to shape the other person's behavior. They're afraid of losing the connection. But their grip only makes the other person feel suffocated. The more they try to control, the more distant the relationship becomes. When they finally let go, when they stop trying to force the connection and just let it be, the space between them opens up. The trust grows. The connection becomes deeper because now it's not built on fear, but on mutual respect and freedom. The same can be true with your own emotions. You might hold on to anger, resentment, or fear because you think they protect you. You keep those feelings close, thinking they will keep you safe. But in reality, they build walls. When you let go of them, when you stop letting them control you, you make room for peace and understanding. You become more open, not just to others, but to yourself. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means releasing the hold on what you can't control. And in doing so, creating space for true connection. Contentment doesn't come from accumulating more things, experiences, or achievements. It comes from needing less. The more you want, the more restless you become. You think if you get that new car, that promotion, or that perfect vacation, you'll finally feel at peace. But once you have it, you realize the feeling fades and you're looking for the next thing. The cycle never ends. Imagine someone who constantly buys new clothes to feel better about themselves. Each new item gives them a brief sense of excitement, but soon they're looking for more. What they don't realize is that the root of their dissatisfaction isn't the clothes, it's the need for more. If they stopped focusing on what's next and looked at what they already had, they might see how much they already own, how much they already enjoy. By needing less, they could start appreciating the clothes they already have, the simple moments of life, and feel more at ease. The same goes for work. You might push yourself for the next promotion, believing that it will bring you the recognition and happiness you want. But even when you achieve it, the satisfaction doesn't last. If instead you focused on doing your best with what you already have, finding joy in the present, you might find a deeper sense of contentment. Needing less shifts your focus from what's missing to what's already here. And in that shift, you find peace. Happiness isn't something you chase. It's not a destination you reach by running faster or pushing harder. The more you try to pursue it, the more it seems to slip through your fingers. You might think that once you get the perfect job, the right relationship, or the next big achievement, happiness will finally come. But that chase often leaves you feeling more exhausted than fulfilled. Instead of pursuing happiness, you have to allow it. Happiness comes from accepting the present, from seeing the good in what's already there. It's about making space for joy, not forcing it. You might be in a situation that isn't perfect, but if you allow yourself to notice the small things, like a kind word, a quiet moment, or a simple pleasure, happiness finds its way in. Think about someone who is always busy, always working toward the next goal. They focus on the future, thinking that happiness will come once they reach it. But the more they focus on that future, the more they miss out on what's in front of them. If they took a step back and allowed themselves to enjoy the present, to appreciate the people around them and the small victories of the day, they might find that happiness isn't something they need to chase. It's something that comes when you stop trying so hard and simply allow it to be. When you try to enjoy something too much, you end up focusing on the wrong things. You think about how to make it perfect, about whether you're having enough fun, or about what's supposed to happen next. And in doing so, you miss the experience entirely. The real joy comes when you stop thinking about enjoyment and just let the moment happen. Imagine going to a concert. At first, you're excited. You want to have the best time. But then, you start paying too much attention to the details. What song they'll play next, whether you're standing in the right spot, or if everyone around you is enjoying it as much as you are. Suddenly, the music doesn't feel as powerful. The lights, the crowd, and the energy are still there, but you're too busy analyzing to actually take it all in. Now, picture the same concert without all that pressure. You stop trying to make it perfect. You let go of the expectations. You start to feel the beat, the rhythm, and the connection with the people around you. You forget that you were trying so hard to enjoy it, and that's when you truly do. The best moments in life happen when you stop focusing on how you're supposed to feel. Whether it's a meal with friends, a walk in the park, or a quiet evening, the key to enjoying it is forgetting that you're trying to enjoy it. The moment becomes more when you stop trying to control it. Suffering can feel overwhelming, like it's the end of everything good. In those tough moments, it's hard to see anything positive. You want to escape it, push it away, and move on as quickly as possible. But sometimes, through the cracks of pain, joy quietly finds its way in. Imagine someone who loses a job. At first, the loss feels like a heavy weight. It's not just about the paycheck, it's about identity, security, and the future. They struggle with the uncertainty, but as time passes, they start to realize something. Without the job, they have space to think, to explore new options, or to focus on things they had forgotten. What seemed like an end becomes a doorway to new possibilities. They find joy in the freedom they didn't expect, the chance to reimagine their life. Suffering doesn't always make sense when you're in the middle of it, but it's often in those moments of discomfort where real growth happens. You don't notice it right away, but as you push through the hard times, you start to discover parts of yourself you hadn't known before. You become stronger, more patient, more open to what comes next. And in that process, joy sneaks in, sometimes unexpectedly. It's not the absence of suffering, but the presence of growth and change that brings that quiet joy. When you embrace the discomfort instead of avoiding it, you create space for joy to show up in ways you wouldn't expect. Meaning doesn't come from collecting things or achieving goals. It comes from what you give. When you focus on others, when you offer your time, your energy, your care, you start to see the world differently. It's in the act of giving that you find purpose, not in what you receive in return. Take someone who works in a job where they don't get much recognition. They might not receive a big paycheck or praise from their boss, but when they help a colleague solve a problem or offer a kind word to someone struggling, they feel a sense of purpose. It's not about what they're getting from the job, it's about what they're giving to others. That simple act of offering something without expecting anything back brings meaning to their day. Think about a parent who spends long hours caring for their children. The work can be tiring and sometimes goes unnoticed, but in those small moments of connection, a hug, a shared laugh, a word of encouragement, there is deep meaning. The parent isn't looking for accolades. They find purpose in the love they give. They realize that in caring for others, they are creating a life that matters. Giving doesn't require grand gestures. It's in the everyday actions, the time you spend listening, the help you offer, the kindness you show. The more you give, the more meaningful your life becomes. Meaning doesn't come from what you receive, but from what you put out into the world. Life feels short because it moves quickly. Days blur together, years pass before you realize it, and one moment you're looking ahead, the next you're looking back. You get caught up in the rush, work, responsibilities, the constant push to do more. It feels like there's never enough time to do everything, to experience everything you want to. In those moments, life feels fleeting. But when you step back and really think about it, life is long. It's full of experiences, opportunities, and quiet moments. It's a journey with enough time to grow, change, and make choices. You'll have time to make mistakes and learn from them. You'll have time to meet people, build relationships, and see the world in ways you hadn't imagined. In the quiet spaces, when you stop to reflect, life stretches out before you. Think about someone who works hard for a decade or more. They might feel like they're always running out of time. But when they look back, they realize how many moments they've lived through, how many people they've met, how much they've learned. Time, in that sense, is long. It's full of small, quiet moments that, when strung together, make a life. Even when life feels fast, It's filled with time to do what matters. It's long enough for you to change direction, for you to make a difference, and for you to find peace. It's both short and long, and it's yours to live. We often waste time trying to save time. We rush from one task to another, trying to make everything more efficient, thinking we're gaining time in the process. But in doing so, we miss the moments we're rushing through. We get so focused on saving time that we forget to actually use it. Imagine someone who spends hours planning the most efficient way to clean their house, trying to save a few minutes by setting up a perfect system. But in the process, they end up stressed and frustrated. Instead of enjoying the task or even finding peace in a slower pace, they're caught in the rush. In trying to save time, they've lost the time they could have spent enjoying the task or even relaxing afterward. The same goes for work. You might try to get ahead by multitasking, answering emails while attending meetings, or scheduling every second of your day. But in doing so, you lose focus. The quality of your work slips. You're so busy trying to save time that the work itself suffers. The time you spent juggling tasks could have been better spent focusing on one thing at a time. In trying to save time, we often miss the point of it. Time isn't something you can hold on to or protect. It's something you use, experience, and let go of. When you stop trying to save it, you can start to truly use it. That's when you get back the moments that matter. The future isn't something that just happens. It's shaped by what you do right now. Every choice you make today builds the foundation for tomorrow. But too often, we get lost in thinking about what's coming next. We focus on the what-ifs and the somedays and forget that the only moment we can control is the present. Imagine someone starting a business. They dream of success, but instead of focusing on taking the first steps, they constantly worry about what will happen months or years down the line. Will they be able to grow the company? Will they have enough clients? These worries, though valid, can paralyze them. They might get so caught up in planning for the future that they forget to take action in the present. They skip small, important steps, making a business plan, reaching out to potential clients, or learning the basics of marketing, because they're too busy stressing about where they'll be in the future. The same happens when we focus too much on long-term goals and forget the small, everyday actions that will get us there. If someone wants to be healthier, they might obsess over their weight months from now. Instead of focusing on today's choices, taking a walk, eating a healthy meal, they put off the actions that matter, thinking they'll start when the timing is better. The future is created by what you do right now. Every moment spent worrying about tomorrow is a moment lost in the present. The key is to focus on today. When you're in a rush, everything feels urgent. You move faster, but things slip through the cracks. You make mistakes, miss details, and end up having to backtrack. In those moments, you might think that speeding up is the only way to get ahead, but the truth is, moving too quickly often slows you down in the long run. Imagine someone trying to complete a project at work. They rush through their tasks, trying to get it done as quickly as possible. In their hurry, they miss important steps or make errors that will need fixing later. If they had slowed down, paid attention to the details, and taken their time to plan the work carefully, they would have finished more efficiently. Instead of rushing through, taking a moment to think clearly and act with intention would have saved them time in the end. The same idea applies in everyday life. If you're always rushing from one thing to the next, you might think you're being productive, but you're only wearing yourself out. When you slow down, you give yourself space to think, prioritize, and make better choices. The more thoughtful your actions, the less likely you are to waste time correcting mistakes or dealing with unnecessary stress. Slowing down doesn't mean being lazy. It means being intentional. By taking the time to move carefully and thoughtfully, you're actually setting yourself up to move faster and more effectively in the future. To truly live, you have to let go of who you were. This doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments when you shed parts of yourself that no longer fit. Every time you face something difficult, something that challenges your sense of comfort or identity, you're giving up a little bit of the old you. In a way, you're dying to who you were, but in that letting go, you make space to grow into something new. Think about someone who leaves a secure job to pursue a passion. The decision is hard, and every step feels like a small death. They have to let go of their old security, the version of themselves that was defined by their job. They face doubt, fear, and sometimes regret. But with each step, they die a little more to that old life. In doing so, they make room for something richer, something that feels more alive to them. This happens in relationships too. You might outgrow parts of yourself as you connect with others, and sometimes that means letting go of old habits or beliefs. Maybe you once avoided conflict, but as you grow, you learn to face difficult conversations. That change feels like dying to the person you used to be, but it's also what allows your relationships to deepen and become more real. Each time you let go, each time you face something that feels like a death, you are making room to live more fully. When you try to hold on too tightly, things often slip through your fingers. Whether it's a relationship, a dream, or even an idea, the more you grip it with force, the more it seems to slip away. The act of holding on creates tension, and tension often leads to pushing things further from you, not drawing them closer. Think about someone trying to control a situation. They try to make everything fit into their plan. They force things to go their way. But the more they push, the more resistance they meet. A simple conversation becomes an argument, and a peaceful moment becomes stressful. The harder they hold on, the more the situation unravels. If instead, they let go of the need to control every detail and allow things to unfold, they might find that the result is more peaceful and natural. The same happens in personal growth. If you try to force change on yourself, you create pressure. You tell yourself, "I need to be different," and the weight of that thought holds you in place. But when you stop forcing it, when you allow yourself to change at your own pace, the growth comes naturally. By letting go of the need to be something else, you make space to become exactly who you are meant to be. Trying to hold on often creates more friction. Letting go brings freedom. The more you focus on aging, the more it feels like it's happening. When you get caught up in the idea of getting older, worrying about wrinkles or missed opportunities, you miss out on the present. The act of living, truly living, keeps you young. It's when you stop paying attention to the moment that time starts to feel heavy. Imagine someone who spends every day counting the years, worrying about the future, and comparing themselves to others. They forget to enjoy the small things, whether it's a conversation with a friend, a walk outside, or a simple meal. They become so focused on what's ahead or what they haven't done yet that they miss out on life as it's happening. In this cycle, they start to feel tired, worn out, as if the years are speeding up. Now picture someone who wakes up every day eager to experience what the world has to offer. They take time to be with the people they care about. They explore new hobbies, and they enjoy the simple joys. They don't worry about getting older because they're too busy living. It's in those moments of real engagement, of being fully present, that they feel time slow down. Aging doesn't happen just because the years pass. It happens when you forget to live. The more you embrace the present, the less you feel the weight of time. Life doesn't pass you by. It's something you actively experience. That's what keeps you young. When you spend too much time worrying about the future, you miss out on the present. Worrying about what might happen takes away your ability to experience what is happening right now. The more you focus on potential problems or what could go wrong, the less you're able to enjoy today. Imagine someone who has a big presentation coming up. They spend the days leading up to it thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if they forget their words? What if the audience doesn't respond well? This constant worrying drains their energy. They're so focused on the future that they can't enjoy the preparation or even the small wins leading up to the event. By the time the presentation arrives, they're exhausted, and the moment feels less satisfying than it should have been. The same thing happens in personal life. You might worry about what's next in your relationship, your career, or your health. You anticipate struggles before they even happen. But in doing that, you're not living in the moments that build a strong relationship, grow your career, or take care of your health. You're so caught up in worrying about what's ahead that you miss the small joys that make life worthwhile. Anticipating the future robs you of the present. The future will come, whether you worry about it or not. The best way to deal with it is to focus on what you can do now and let the future unfold as it will. When something ends, it's easy to focus on the loss, on what's gone. But often, endings are simply the start of something new. Every time one chapter closes, another begins. It's not the end of the story, it's the beginning of a new one, even if it's hard to see it at first. Think about someone leaving a job they've had for years. It feels like a loss at first, saying goodbye to colleagues, stepping away from something familiar. But in that moment of ending, there's also the birth of a new opportunity. They might not know where they're going next, but the end of this job opens the door to something different, something they couldn't have had without the change. The uncertainty they feel now is just the beginning of a new path, new people, and new experiences. The same applies to personal changes. A relationship ends, and it feels like the world is falling apart. The emotions are raw, and the future feels uncertain. But that ending, though painful, clears space for new growth. It allows for self-discovery, for the opportunity to rebuild and learn from what came before. What once seemed like an end is actually the start of a new phase, one where they can grow stronger and move forward in ways they never could while holding on. Every ending is a beginning in disguise. It's a shift, a chance to grow, to learn, and to move in a new direction. The key is to embrace it, even when it's hard to see. Change is the one thing you can count on. No matter how much you plan, no matter how hard you try to stay the same, things will always shift. People change. Situations change. Even your own thoughts and habits evolve over time. What feels permanent today will not stay that way forever. Imagine someone living in the same city for years. They know the streets, the routines, the faces. It feels like everything is stable, predictable. But over time, new businesses open, the city grows, and the people around them change. The neighborhoods shift, and what was once familiar starts to feel different. The city isn't the same, even though they tried to hold on to the way things used to be. The same thing happens in personal life. You may think that the way you've always done things is the way it will always be. You have routines, relationships, habits that feel comfortable. But life has a way of throwing surprises. People change, you grow, and what worked for you yesterday might not work today. What felt right can suddenly feel off. Even in work, change is constant. New technologies, new trends, new expectations, all of it pushes you to adapt. If you try to avoid change, you'll find yourself stuck. But when you embrace it, you open yourself to new possibilities. The only constant in life is change, and how you respond to it determines how you move forward. The more you hold on to someone, the more you push them away. When you cling to a person, whether it's out of fear, need, or insecurity, you create pressure. They begin to feel trapped, and the connection starts to loosen, even if you're holding tighter. People need space to breathe, to grow, and to be themselves. When you try to control or hold on too tightly, it doesn't strengthen the relationship, it weakens it. Imagine a friend who is constantly checking in, texting, or needing reassurance. At first, the other person might respond, but over time, the constant pressure becomes exhausting. The more they feel like they need to respond or prove their affection, the more they start to pull away. What seemed like care turns into control, and soon the bond weakens. In a romantic relationship, this is even more noticeable. When one partner clings to the other, fearing that any space or distance will break the connection, the relationship starts to feel suffocating. Instead of deepening the connection, it creates tension. The more you try to hold on, the more the other person starts to retreat. True love isn't about clinging, it's about trust and allowing the other person the freedom to be who they are. When you let go, when you stop trying to control the other person, you create room for the relationship to grow. It's in that freedom, in giving space, that love becomes stronger. When you understand yourself, you begin to understand others better. Our reactions, our emotions, and even the way we think are often shaped by our own experiences, beliefs, and insecurities. When you take the time to reflect on why you feel or act a certain way, you start to see how those same factors play a role in others. This awareness helps you connect with people more deeply and with more compassion. Imagine someone who struggles with patience. They often feel frustrated when things don't go as planned, and they have a hard time dealing with delays or disruptions. If they take a moment to examine why they feel this way, they might realize that their frustration stems from a fear of losing control. Once they understand this about themselves, they can begin to recognize it in others. They might notice someone else becoming impatient for similar reasons, and instead of reacting with frustration, they can respond with understanding. The more you learn about your own patterns, the more you begin to recognize them in others. If you understand your own fears and desires, you can see how others might be driven by the same things. It helps you navigate conversations, avoid misunderstandings, and connect on a deeper level. Understanding yourself creates a clearer mirror for seeing the motivations and struggles of others, and it allows you to approach relationships with more empathy and less judgment. You cannot fully love others if you don't love yourself first. It's easy to give love to others, but if you're not kind to yourself, if you don't accept yourself, your love for others can feel forced or incomplete. When you struggle to appreciate who you are, it becomes harder to truly see and appreciate the people around you. Imagine someone who constantly doubts their worth. They might try to be there for their friends, always helping and giving, but deep down, they feel unworthy of love. That feeling creeps into their relationships. They give, but they don't receive. Their love becomes transactional, as if they need to prove something. The more they struggle with their own sense of self, the harder it is for them to love others freely. On the other hand, someone who accepts themselves, flaws and all, can give love without conditions. They don't need constant reassurance because they already know their value. When they love others, it comes from a place of strength, not from a need to fill a void. Their love is more genuine because they're not trying to prove anything. They can love others for who they are without feeling like they need something in return. Loving yourself isn't about being perfect. It's about accepting yourself fully, embracing your strengths and weaknesses. When you do this, your ability to love others grows because you're no longer giving out of need, but out of abundance. The strongest relationships are built on the freedom to grow, not just the comfort of staying the same. People need room to develop, to change, and to explore new parts of themselves. When you give someone the space to grow, you don't just preserve the relationship, you strengthen it. Think about a friendship where both people feel secure enough to be themselves, without the pressure to fit into a certain role. They support each other's personal growth, even when it means changing direction or taking different paths. If one friend wants to take a new job in another city or try something outside their usual comfort zone, the other doesn't feel threatened by the change. Instead, they encourage it. In doing so, the friendship becomes stronger, not weaker. The space given allows both to flourish individually and as friends. In romantic relationships, too, growth is essential. If two people are constantly dependent on each other for validation or comfort, they risk stifling their own development. The best partnerships are the ones where both partners feel free to pursue their interests, goals, and personal growth. If you can give each other space to grow without fear of drifting apart, you build a bond that's stronger, more resilient, and more fulfilling. When relationships give space, they don't just survive, they thrive. The people in them are able to develop into their fullest selves, and that strength brings them back together in new and deeper ways. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, but it's actually one of the strongest things you can do. It takes courage to open up, to show your true self, and to expose parts of you that you might usually hide. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you give others the chance to connect with you on a deeper level. It's in that openness that real strength lies. Think about someone who shares their struggles with a close friend. Instead of pretending to have it all together, they admit they're struggling. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's an act of strength. They trust that their friend will listen without judgment and that their connection will deepen because of their honesty. In doing so, they not only strengthen the bond between them, but they also allow themselves to receive support, which helps them grow stronger. In a workplace, vulnerability can also be a strength. A leader who admits they don't have all the answers, but is open to feedback or help from their team, creates an environment of trust and collaboration. This openness encourages others to share their ideas, knowing they're not expected to be perfect. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you open the door for others to do the same, creating stronger, more supportive relationships in all areas of life. Being vulnerable isn't about being weak. It's about being brave enough to show up as you truly are, without hiding behind a mask. It's in that honesty and openness that true strength is built. The more you listen, the more others will listen to you. When you truly hear someone, without interrupting or waiting for your turn to speak, you build trust. People feel valued when they know they are being listened to, and when they feel heard, they are more likely to listen to you in return. Imagine a conversation where one person is talking while the other is constantly thinking about what they will say next. It feels like the first person is just talking at them, not with them. The connection isn't real. But when you stop thinking about what's next in the conversation and truly focus on the person speaking, you create space for a deeper connection. You understand not just the words, but the feelings behind them. This works in any kind of relationship, whether personal or professional. A manager who listens to their team members builds loyalty and respect. When employees feel heard, they are more likely to open up, share ideas, and contribute fully. The manager doesn't need to dominate every conversation. They need to listen. And in doing so, they create an environment where their voice carries weight when it's time to speak. In friendships, too, listening fosters understanding. When you take the time to hear what someone is saying, you show them you care. That's when conversations become meaningful, and that's when relationships grow. The more you listen, the more your words will matter. The act of listening builds respect and opens the door for genuine connection. To truly be with someone, you must first be comfortable being alone. It's easy to think that being with others is the key to happiness, but if you don't know how to be content on your own, you'll struggle to connect with others in a meaningful way. Being alone gives you the space to understand who you are, what you need, and what you can offer in a relationship. Imagine someone who is always surrounded by friends or partners, constantly seeking validation or company. They might find comfort in not being alone, but they never take the time to understand their own needs or feelings. This makes it difficult to be fully present in a relationship because they are relying on others to fill a gap that they haven't learned to fill themselves. On the other hand, when you spend time alone, you start to discover what makes you happy, what makes you tick, and what you truly value. You learn to enjoy your own company and understand your own thoughts and emotions. This self-awareness makes it easier to connect with others, not from a place of need, but from a place of completeness. When you are whole by yourself, you don't rely on others to complete you. Instead, you bring your full self into a relationship. You understand what it means to give and receive, to share space without losing your sense of identity. You don't need the other person to fill a void. You simply enjoy being together, knowing who you are apart from them. When you help others, you often heal yourself in the process. It's easy to get caught up in your own pain, to focus on what you're struggling with. But when you shift your focus to someone else, you begin to find healing in ways you didn't expect. Helping others allows you to step outside of your own concerns, and in doing so, you create space for your own wounds to heal. Imagine someone who's going through a tough time. They feel stuck in their own sadness, unsure how to move forward. But when they reach out to a friend who is also struggling and offer their support, something changes. In helping their friend, they begin to see their own strength. They realize that they have the capacity to be there for someone else, and that act of kindness begins to lift their own spirits. It's in the process of giving that they find the healing they need. This can happen in many areas of life. A teacher who gives their time to guide a struggling student may find a sense of purpose in that connection. A volunteer who offers their time to help those in need may experience their own emotional growth through the act of giving. The more you focus on helping others, the more you begin to see your own growth and healing. The act of giving doesn't just benefit the other person, it has the power to transform you as well. Silence is often overlooked in conversations, but it can deepen connection just as much as words. While talking creates space for sharing thoughts and feelings, Silence allows room for understanding. It's in those quiet moments that true connection often forms, when both people are present without the need to fill every second with conversation. Consider two friends sitting together, not talking, but simply enjoying each other's presence. In the silence, they communicate without words. They may not need to speak to understand each other. Their body language, the way they sit, the small glances exchanged, all speak volumes. In those moments, their bond grows stronger because they are connecting in a way that words can't always capture. In a romantic relationship, silence can be just as important. After a long day, sitting together in silence, maybe watching the sunset or just holding hands, can strengthen a relationship. It's not about what is said, but about being together without needing to say anything at all. That quiet, shared space builds a comfort that words can't always provide. Silence doesn't need to be awkward or uncomfortable. When embraced, it becomes a powerful tool for connection. It allows both people to be fully present without the need to constantly fill the space with talk. It gives each person the chance to reflect and be understood without having to explain everything. Sometimes it's in the quietest moments that the strongest connections are made. Love isn't built on owning someone or holding on to them tightly. It grows when you give someone your time, your attention, and your presence. When you truly show up for someone without trying to control or possess them, that's when the connection deepens. It's not about what you can claim or what you can give them materially. It's about being there, fully and without reservation. Imagine two people in a relationship. One partner constantly wants to know where the other is, what they're doing, and who they're with. They try to hold on tightly, thinking that love comes from keeping close control. But the other partner feels trapped, like they're being suffocated. The more they feel controlled, the more distant they become. Love in that space can't thrive because the foundation is built on possession, not presence. Now picture a different dynamic. Two people who respect each other's space, but always show up when it matters. They're not constantly checking in or trying to control each other. Instead, they invest in quality time together, listening, supporting, and enjoying each other's company. Their love grows because it's rooted in presence, not ownership. The connection they share is stronger because it's built on mutual respect and understanding, not on trying to claim each other. True love doesn't need to be controlled. It thrives in the space where both people can just be, with no strings attached, no demands. Chasing success destroys it. That's something people don't want to hear, especially when everything around them says the opposite. You grow up being told to set goals, hustle, grind, keep moving forward. Don't stop, don't rest, don't breathe, just chase. But the problem is, success doesn't work that way. The harder you chase it, the faster it pulls away. You see it in people who never stop working. They think if they just push a little harder, stay up a little later, take one more meeting, they'll finally break through. But they don't. They burn out. Their work gets sloppy. Their focus gets narrow. They stop seeing what matters. And when they finally look up, success is gone. Not because it was too far, but because they ran past it without noticing. Success is often a result, not a goal. It shows up when you're doing something well for the right reason, when you're patient, when you build slow and steady. A farmer doesn't chase crops across the field. He plants. He waits. If he digs up the soil every day to check progress, nothing grows. But if he tends it, waters it, leaves it alone, something takes root. People forget that. You can't force trust. You can't rush mastery. You can't sprint toward purpose and expect it to meet you halfway. That's not how it works. You end up chasing something that only exists in your head, a moving target that was never real to begin with. And in the process, you miss what could have been success already sitting at your feet, waiting to be noticed. Don't try, just do. That's not about laziness or carelessness. It means stop straining so hard to be something and start doing the thing itself. Trying makes it about you. Doing makes it about the work. When people say they're trying to be a writer, they usually aren't writing. They're thinking about writing, planning to write, worrying if they're good enough to write. But if you write even one sentence, you are a writer. Same with anything else. If you act like a leader, people follow. If you solve problems, you're useful. No one needs to hear about your effort. They see the result. trying turns into performance. It creates tension. You start asking, am I doing this right? Is this working? You compare yourself to others. You look for validation. That slows you down. It distracts you. When you stop trying to be good and just do the thing with care, you get better. Quietly, steadily, without applause. You don't see a tree trying to grow. It just grows. You don't see a carpenter trying to build. He measures, cuts, and builds. Over time, the results speak. Success shows up when the work is real, not when you chase after the label. Doing builds confidence, not because you feel ready, but because you move. You act, even when unsure, especially when unsure. You make mistakes, learn, adjust. That's forward motion. That's the path. Trying waits for permission. Doing doesn't ask, it just begins. Authenticity over proving. That's the difference between doing something because it matters to you and doing it because you want others to notice. When you work from a place of authenticity, you're focused. You listen to yourself. You trust your process. When you work to prove yourself, you lose that. You look outward. You start performing instead of creating. It's easy to get caught up in proving, especially in rooms where you feel like you don't belong yet. You want to be taken seriously. You want people to see your value. So you push harder. You over-explain. You second-guess every choice. That pressure doesn't help the work. It only drains your energy and makes you forget why you started. The best work happens when you're present, not when you're proving. A chef cooks better when thinking about the dish, not the critic. A speaker connects more when speaking plainly, not performing intelligence. People can feel the difference. They know when you're doing something because it's part of you, not because you're trying to impress. Proving is noisy. It tries to fill the space. Authenticity is quiet. It lets the work speak for itself. You don't need to tell people how good you are when the work already shows it. That takes patience and confidence. Not the kind that comes from praise, but the kind you build by doing the work every day without waiting for approval. You don't need to prove yourself. You just need to be yourself and keep going. Less is more. That's not a slogan. It's a fact most people learn the hard way. You think that if you put in more hours, push through more tasks, and stay busy, you'll get ahead. But too much effort in too many directions just spreads you thin. You don't move faster. You just wear yourself down. Working less doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what matters. Cutting the noise, dropping what's not essential. When you're rested, clear, and focused, you can finish in 2 hours what might have taken 8 on a bad day. Not because you're rushing, but because you're thinking. You're choosing. You're not reacting to everything. A tired brain doesn't solve problems, it repeats them. You check the same email 5 times, you rewrite the same paragraph, you sit in a meeting and forget what was said. But when you take breaks, when you set boundaries, your work sharpens. You say no more often. You do less. But each thing you do hits harder. Look at anyone who's mastered something. They don't stay busy. They stay deliberate. A writer doesn't write more words to make the book better. They write the right ones. A designer doesn't add more features to make the product work. They remove what's in the way. If you always work at full speed, you miss the signs that something needs to change. But if you slow down, you notice, you adjust, you focus. That's when the real progress happens. Not from doing more, but from doing less with more attention. Success without meaning is failure. You can hit every target, earn every title, and still feel empty at the end of the day. People don't talk about that part. They show the wins, the numbers, the surface. But what they don't show is the quiet question that creeps in afterward. Why doesn't this feel like enough? It happens when the work doesn't line up with what matters to you. You get good at something because it pays well or because people notice. You keep climbing because that's what's expected. And for a while, it works. You move up, you hit your goals, but something feels off. You get the promotion and don't feel proud. You finish the project and feel nothing. It's not burnout. It's disconnection. Meaning isn't a bonus, it's the core. Without it, success turns hollow. You can trick yourself for a while, you can stay busy, you can collect praise, but if the work has no purpose to you, it won't land, it won't last. And the longer you keep going without meaning, the heavier the success feels, like carrying a prize you didn't want to win. You don't need to save the world to feel meaning, but you do need to care. Maybe it's who you work with, maybe it's what you build, Maybe it's how you show up. Meaning can be simple, clear, quiet, but without it, success won't feel right. It'll feel like failure in disguise, loud, polished, and completely empty. Purpose comes from service, not from ambition, not from chasing status or building a name. You can have drive and discipline, you can climb fast, but if the work doesn't serve someone beyond yourself, it won't feel like enough. Ambition alone only looks forward. Service looks outward. When people search for purpose, they often look at what they want, what they hope to get. That works for a while, but it runs dry. Because meaning doesn't come from getting, it comes from giving, from impact, from showing up for someone else and doing something that makes their load lighter, their path clearer, their life better in some way. Service doesn't always mean charity or sacrifice. It means usefulness. It means building tools others can use, solving problems that aren't just your own, listening instead of performing. You see it in a teacher who stays after class, a builder who makes something solid and simple, a doctor who explains instead of rushing out the door. None of them do it for applause. They do it because they know the work matters when it reaches someone else. Ambition burns hot and fast. It wants to be seen. It wants to win. Service is quieter, slower, but it lasts. It doesn't fade when things get hard. It doesn't break when no one's watching. Because it's not about the spotlight. It's about the weight you carry for others and how that weight shapes you into someone solid. Purpose comes when you stop asking what you want from the world and start asking what you can offer. That's where the real work begins. Stop needing, start receiving. That's not about giving up. It's about letting go of the grip that makes it harder to hold anything. When you need something too much, you chase it. You obsess. You tighten around the idea of it. That pressure makes it run from you. Needing is different from wanting. Wanting is honest, it's clear. But needing adds fear. You think if you don't get the thing, something will fall apart. So you try to control it. You overthink. You push too hard. And in the process, you miss what's already within reach. It happens with work. You need the job to go well, so you get stiff. You stop listening. You force the outcome. That makes the work worse. It happens with people. You need their approval, so you stop being yourself. You perform. You overextend. They pull away. The more tightly you hold the outcome, the more likely you are to lose it. But when you stop needing, something shifts. You still care. You still act. But you let go of the story that says it has to happen this way. That space makes room for things to unfold. You show up better. You make clearer choices. You move with less tension, and things start showing up. Not always how you expected, sometimes better, because you're finally open to receiving, not chasing. It doesn't mean you don't work hard. It means you stop clinging. You give your best and let go. That's when the right things start to arrive. Quietly, on time, on their own. Win by not fighting. It sounds backwards, but most fights aren't worth the time. You don't lose by walking away. You lose by getting pulled into something that wastes your energy. People think every challenge needs a response. Every insult needs defending. But not all battles matter. Not all hills are worth standing on. The need to prove yourself, to win every argument, to correct every wrong, that comes from ego. It's loud. It says, I can't let this go. But the cost is high. You burn time. You burn energy. You walk away tired, not better. Meanwhile, the person who stepped aside kept moving. Some people bait you into fights. They want a reaction. They want your focus. If you give it, they've already won. The win isn't in the outcome, it's in stealing your attention. But when you don't react, you keep your ground. You keep your clarity. That's the real win. You see it in good leaders. They don't argue to be right, they listen, then act. If the conflict isn't useful, they don't join it. Not from weakness, from discipline. They know some things fall apart on their own. No need to swing. Walking away isn't surrender, it's control. You pick your fights. You wait for the ones that matter, the ones tied to principle, not pride. And when you do that, you don't just win more, you lose less. You carry less. You move farther. Most battles don't need winning, they need ignoring. Do to discover purpose. That's the part most people skip. They sit with the question, turn it over in their mind, wait for clarity to show up. But purpose doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing, from movement, from showing up, even when the goal isn't clear. You don't find direction by standing still. You find it by walking. Try something. build something, help someone, not because it's perfect or final, but because it gets your hands moving. The work teaches you. It shows you what matters and what doesn't. It shows you what feels like a dead end and what feels alive. That's how purpose begins. Not with an answer, but with a step. People want to figure it out first. They make lists, they take quizzes, they wait for the right time. But the truth is, the more time you spend trying to define your purpose before you act, the harder it is to find. You can't think your way into something that only reveals itself in motion. A writer doesn't know their message before the page. A builder doesn't know the whole shape before the first board. You do the work, and then the shape comes. Purpose hides in the middle of action, not at the edge of planning. You don't need a grand vision to begin. You need a task, a role, a space to contribute. Start small, do it well, keep going. That's how purpose finds you, when you stop asking what it is and start doing what you can. Let go to achieve. That's not giving up. It's stepping back from trying to force an outcome that doesn't want to be forced. When you fixate on how things have to turn out, you narrow your view. You start working for control, not clarity. You stop listening. You lose flow. Outcomes don't improve when you tighten your grip. They improve when you do the work and let the result unfold. It sounds passive, but it isn't. It's active trust. You show up fully. You put in the effort. Then you release the outcome. Not because you don't care, but because you know that obsessing over the finish line makes you stumble on the way there. Think of someone playing a sport. The moment they start thinking too much about winning, their movements change. They hesitate. They grip too hard. They stop playing with instinct. That's when they lose. But when they play with focus and let go of needing the win, they play better. They move freer. They don't stop caring. They stop gripping. Letting go clears space. It gives your mind room to notice what's in front of you instead of chasing what's around the corner. You make better decisions. You take smarter risks. You recover faster. And more often than not, the outcome works out. Not because you forced it, but because you stayed steady while it formed. Achievement doesn't like desperation. It needs rhythm, presence. Letting go doesn't mean less care. It means less control. And that shift makes all the difference. Inner truth hides in silence, not the kind where you scroll in a quiet room or walk with music in your ears. Real silence. The kind where nothing distracts you and nothing fills the space. Most people don't reach it often. They fill the gaps with noise, opinions, headlines, updates, advice. They search everywhere but inside. The more you look outside for answers, the more you miss what's already in you. You ask others what to do, how to live, who to be. You take on their language, their goals, their pace. It feels productive, it feels safe. But over time, it pulls you away from your own voice. Truth doesn't shout, it doesn't argue. It waits in the quiet. It speaks when you stop filling the space. That's why it's easy to miss. That's why people fear silence. It doesn't give quick answers. It reflects. It shows you what you've been avoiding. Not to punish you, to point you home. You find it when you sit still long enough to hear your own thoughts without reacting, when you breathe without planning, when you walk without a goal. That's when things surface. A knowing, a memory, a sense that this thing is right and that thing is not. No reasoning, no argument, just clear. No one else can give you that. They can point, but they can't see what you need to. The only way to know your own truth is to stop asking for someone else's. That starts in silence. That's where it's been the whole time. Others reveal you. You can spend years learning about yourself, reading, reflecting, keeping track of your habits, and still miss something important. You can't see your blind spots by yourself. That's the nature of them. You need other people to hold up the mirror. Sometimes it's obvious. You react strongly to someone's tone, and they ask why. You hear your voice in a recording and realize how different you sound. You think you're patient until you're stuck in traffic with someone who stays calm while you lose your edge. They don't judge you. They show you. Other times, it's more subtle. A friend tells you the story you've told 100 times, but this time, they say it with a different ending. You realize you've left out a detail that changes the whole thing. You didn't mean to lie. You just didn't see it clearly until someone else held it up to the light. This doesn't mean others define you. It means they reveal the parts of you you can't access alone. You see your generosity in how someone thanks you. You see your pride when someone challenges you. You see your growth when someone reminds you how you used to be. Without these moments, you stay stuck in your own version of yourself, safe, familiar, and often incomplete. Self-awareness isn't built in isolation. It's shaped in relationships, in reflection, in friction. Other people don't just take up space in your life. They help show you who's living it. Certainty blocks growth. It feels safe, but it stalls you. When you think you've figured it all out, you stop asking questions. You stop listening. You start defending what you know instead of expanding what you understand. Growth needs movement. It needs space to shift. But certainty locks you in place. It tells you the work is done, that you've arrived, that there's nothing left to learn. That mindset doesn't just slow you down, it shuts you down. You see it in people who once took risks but now just repeat themselves. They talk like experts, but their work stays the same. No surprise, no stretch, just patterns. Safe, flat, expected. The confidence isn't real, it's armor. And under it, they've stopped learning. Real growth means staying open, not weak, not unsure. Just honest about how little any of us truly know. When you stay open, you notice more. You catch small changes. You admit mistakes faster. You get sharper, not by knowing more, but by noticing more. Think about someone learning a craft. A good carpenter never says, "I've mastered everything." They say, "This wood behaves differently in damp air," or "I'm still working on these joints." That's not doubt. That's skill. They grow because they don't assume they've arrived. The moment you think you've reached the top, you stop climbing. You stand still, and the world keeps moving without you. Staying open doesn't mean being lost. It means choosing growth over pride. It means keeping space for what you don't know, because that's where the next step always starts. Others are your mirror, not in a poetic sense, in a real useful one. The clearer you see others, the more you start to see yourself, how you react to them, what you admire, what you judge. That reflection shows you who you are, not just who they are. If someone's confidence bothers you, ask why. If someone's kindness moves you, ask what it stirs up. Maybe it's something you lack. Maybe it's something you forgot. What you see in them has something to do with you, always. You learn a lot by paying attention to how people make you feel, not in a self-centered way, just in an honest one. You might envy someone who takes up space easily. You might resent someone who sets a hard boundary. You might feel uneasy around someone who stays quiet. These are signs, not about them, about you. You also see your strengths this way. When someone thanks you for listening, you notice how much space you give. When someone copies your habit, you realize what example you're setting. You can't always see your impact from inside your own head, but others feel it. And when you pay attention, you can too. This isn't about comparison. It's about recognition. The way you interpret others says something about your own lens. You're not separate from what you see. You shape it, and it shapes you. That's why the more clearly you look at others, the more honest your reflection becomes. Step out to see in. You can't understand yourself by staying inside your own head. Thoughts loop. Feelings get tangled. Everything feels louder than it is. Sometimes you need distance to see clearly. That doesn't mean you run away. It means you step back, change your view, see yourself as others might, not to judge, but to understand. How do you sound when you speak? What do your habits look like from the outside? If you were listening to yourself, what would you hear? You don't get that kind of clarity when you're always in motion or always thinking. You get it when you pause and observe, when you watch your own choices from a few steps away, not with blame, with curiosity. You can also find that distance through people. The way someone responds to you tells you what you're putting out. If you interrupt a lot, people stop talking. If you hesitate, people speak over you. If you show up grounded, people lean in. These are mirrors. They help you see things that feel invisible from the inside. New places help too. A different room, a walk with no phone, a trip alone. When you're not in your usual routine, you notice your defaults. You see what you reach for, what you avoid, what you need more than you thought. It's not about escape, it's about perspective. To know what's true for you, you have to look from somewhere else. Step out, watch quietly, then return with eyes that see better. Clarity can be alienating. The clearer you see yourself, the more you might start to feel like a stranger. For so long, you operate on autopilot, moving through life with assumptions about who you are, what you want, and how you behave. But when you step back and look at yourself clearly, you start to notice things that weren't as obvious before. At first, it feels like a small shift. Maybe you notice how you react to certain people or situations in ways that surprise you, or you see patterns in your behavior that you didn't recognize before. You might feel proud of what you've built, but also strangely distant from the person who built it. You realize that the image you've carried around for so long of who you are might not be as accurate as you thought. When you see yourself clearly, you begin to question things that you never questioned before. You might wonder why you make certain choices, why you avoid certain conversations, why you keep certain people at arm's length. The answers aren't always easy. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. It can make you feel exposed, unsure of where to go next. It's not a matter of not knowing who you are anymore. It's about realizing that who you thought you were isn't the whole picture. And with that realization comes discomfort. You start to feel disconnected from the version of yourself you've lived with for years. Seeing yourself clearly forces you to confront parts of yourself that were hidden. That confrontation can be alienating, but it's also the first step in understanding who you truly are. Identity is a mask. You are not who you think you are, and neither is anyone else. We all wear identities like costumes, shapes we take on to move through the world, to fit in, to be understood. These identities are not the truth of who we are. They are what we present to the outside world. They are roles we play, even to ourselves. You might think you know who you are. Maybe you're a parent, a professional, an artist, but those are labels. They describe what you do, not who you truly are. When you strip away the roles, the labels, and the expectations, what's left? Often it's a quiet uncertainty. You realize that all you've been doing is playing the part. The same applies to others. The person who seems confident might be hiding fear. The one who appears tough may be fighting vulnerability. The friend who always listens might be hiding their own need to speak. We are all acting, to some degree, shaping ourselves in response to how we think others will see us. But underneath, we are all searching for something more real, something deeper than the image we've created. The problem is, we often forget that we're wearing the mask. We start to believe it's who we really are. But in truth, we are all more than the parts we show. When you let go of the identity, you start to see things differently. You stop hiding, and in that moment, the mask begins to slip. Knowing the illusion isn't enough. Just because you see the trick doesn't mean it stops working. Awareness can open your eyes, but it doesn't instantly change the reality you're living in. You can know something is false and still act as if it's true. It's like understanding that a magic trick isn't real, but still being amazed by it in the moment. Take fear, for example. You can know your fears are based on past experiences, not actual threats. You can tell yourself, this is just my mind creating stories, but knowing that doesn't make the fear go away. It doesn't suddenly make you act without hesitation. The feeling doesn't vanish because you understand it. You still have to face it, move through it, and let go of it step by step. The same happens with old habits. You can be aware that you're acting out of insecurity or repeating patterns from childhood, but that doesn't mean you break free from them just by recognizing them. The mind doesn't work that quickly. Awareness is the first step, but it's not the solution. It's like realizing you're lost in the woods. You know the way out, but you still have to walk the path. To change, you have to take action. You have to move beyond just knowing and start doing. The illusion doesn't disappear with awareness alone. It fades only when you stop living within its boundaries. That's where the real work happens. Control destroys authenticity. The harder you try to control how others see you, the less you show who you really are. You start shaping yourself into what you think others want, wearing a mask that fits their expectations instead of your own truth. At first, it feels like you're managing, like you're presenting yourself in the best light. But over time, it gets harder to keep up the act. You become more distant from yourself and less sure of who you actually are. You see it in people who try to fit in at all costs. They adapt their opinions to match the crowd. They laugh when others laugh, even when they don't find it funny. They dress a certain way, speak a certain way, and behave a certain way to be accepted. But in doing so, they lose the chance to be real. They end up giving away pieces of themselves, not because they want to, but because they think they have to. Think about someone who always wants to be the center of attention. They may work hard to control the conversation, to steer it in a direction that makes them look good. They talk louder, joke more, dress flashier. But the more they try to control how others see them, the less genuine their presence becomes. People start to notice. They feel the difference. The person seems less like themselves, more like a performance. The truth is, authenticity comes from letting go of control. It comes from speaking your truth without worrying about approval. It comes from acting in alignment with your values, not in reaction to the opinions of others. The moment you stop trying to control, you start being real. And that's when people see the real you. Sometimes pretending is the first step to becoming. When you step into something new, you don't always feel ready. You might not have the confidence, the skills, or the experience you think you need. But pretending to be the person you want to become is often the only way to start. It's not about being fake, it's about stepping into the role before you fully feel it. Take the example of someone who wants to be a leader. Maybe they don't feel qualified. They haven't yet led a team or made tough decisions. But if they wait until they feel completely ready, they might never step up. Instead, they start by pretending. They act confident. They make decisions. They lead meetings, even if it feels uncomfortable. Slowly, the pretending turns into real skill. The actions become natural. The confidence builds. The same goes for anything. You might want to be a writer but feel insecure about your writing. If you wait until you're a real writer, you might never start. Instead, write as if you are one. Write every day. Submit your work. Even when it feels like you're pretending, keep going. Over time, it stops being pretending and starts being who you are. Pretending doesn't mean you're lying to yourself. It means you're giving yourself permission to grow into the person you want to be. Sometimes, the only way to find your real self is to start by pretending. To stop feeling stuck, you must stop resisting the feeling. Often, the more you try to push away the discomfort of being stuck, the more you stay in it. You try to ignore it, force it away, or distract yourself with other things, but the feeling doesn't disappear. It only grows stronger. Think about being stuck in traffic. The more you focus on how much you hate it, how much you want to be somewhere else, the more frustrated you become. The more you try to escape the feeling of being stuck, the longer it seems to last. But when you stop resisting, when you accept that you are stuck for the moment, you start to relax. You can start thinking clearly, you can make a plan, and eventually, the situation moves. The same happens when you feel stuck in life. Maybe you're stuck in your job, in a relationship, or in a routine. The more you resist, the more frustrated you get. You may find yourself pushing harder, trying to make things change on your own terms. But when you stop fighting it, when you sit with the discomfort, things start to shift. You begin to see new perspectives. You can step back and figure out what you actually need to move forward. Feeling stuck doesn't need to be avoided. It's a sign. When you stop resisting it, you start moving past it. It's through acceptance that you find your way out. Pain builds strength. The more you try to avoid emotional pain, the weaker it makes you. You can't grow by running from discomfort. You grow by facing it, feeling it, and letting it teach you. When you experience pain, whether it's loss, heartbreak, or disappointment, it's natural to want to push it away. You distract yourself, keep busy, or try to convince yourself you're fine. But that only delays what needs to happen. The pain doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It lingers and it holds you back. The real strength comes when you stop fighting the pain. You let yourself feel it fully. You sit with the hurt, the frustration, the sadness. You don't judge yourself for it. You just allow it to be there. When you do that, something shifts. You learn what's important to you, what you truly care about, and what you need to change. A person who has been through hardship and faced their pain doesn't become weaker for it. They become more resilient. They learn how to handle difficult situations without letting their emotions control them. They learn how to bounce back faster. They understand their own limits, and they know how to push through them. Pain, when embraced, doesn't break you. It builds you. It teaches you to trust yourself, to understand what you're capable of, and to be more compassionate toward others who are going through their own struggles. It may not be easy, but it makes you stronger every time you face it head on. Letting yourself fall apart is how you come together. It sounds strange because we're taught to keep it together, to stay strong no matter what. But the truth is, sometimes the only way to heal is to let the walls come down. When everything feels like it's breaking, trying to hold yourself together only keeps you from feeling what you need to feel. Think about a person who's faced deep loss. At first, they might try to stay composed, keep moving through life like nothing happened. But inside, they're a mess. And eventually, that mess comes to the surface. It's in the form of tears, anger, confusion. At that point, trying to hold it together doesn't work. They break down. And in that breakdown, they start to understand themselves better. They feel the pain fully. They process what they've been avoiding. It's ugly. It's uncomfortable. But it's the only way forward. After the fall comes the rebuild. It's not an overnight process, but it starts with being honest about where you are. You can't rebuild on a lie. You rebuild by looking at the pieces, seeing what's left, and deciding how to put it all back together. The cracks become part of the strength. The lessons learned in the collapse become the foundation for something new. Letting yourself fall apart doesn't mean giving up. It means giving yourself the space to rebuild from the ground up. And in that space, you discover a strength you didn't know you had. Numbness is avoidance. You feel most numb when you avoid feeling. At first, the emotions are sharp. They catch you off guard. You might feel anger or sadness, but it's too much. So you push it away. You tell yourself it's not important, or you convince yourself that it will pass if you just keep moving. But every time you do that, the feelings get buried a little deeper, and the numbness grows stronger. You see this in people who avoid difficult conversations or hard decisions. Instead of facing the tension, they distract themselves with work or entertainment. They keep themselves busy, and the more they avoid, the more distant they feel from their true emotions. It's not that they stop feeling, they just stop feeling what matters. Over time, it becomes harder to feel anything at all. You stop recognizing your own reactions. You may look at a situation and feel nothing, not because you don't care, but because you've conditioned yourself to avoid the discomfort of emotional truth. This numbness can slip into everything: relationships, work, life itself. You become disconnected, not because you don't want to feel, but because feeling has become too painful. Avoidance doesn't make the emotions go away. It only makes them harder to reach. And when you finally try to face them again, it feels like a wall that's been built up too high. The numbness doesn't protect you. It traps you in a place where you're cut off from the depth of who you are. Suppression amplifies. The more you suppress, the louder it returns. When you push your emotions down, trying to ignore or hide them, they don't disappear. They grow stronger, waiting for a moment when you can't control them anymore. Take anger, for example. If something frustrates you and you decide to keep it inside instead of expressing it, it doesn't go away. It builds up. At first, it might seem manageable, but over time, that suppressed anger turns into a quiet pressure. Then, one day, something small sets you off. You snap over a minor issue. What's happening isn't just about that moment. It's the accumulation of everything you didn't let yourself feel. And when it bursts, it can be much bigger than it should be. The same happens with sadness. You might tell yourself that you're too busy to grieve, or that you should be strong and move on. But the grief doesn't disappear. It waits. It shows up in moments when you least expect it, when you see something that reminds you of what you've lost, or when you're alone and your mind drifts to what you've been avoiding. It doesn't leave. It just grows louder, harder to ignore. Suppression doesn't make feelings go away. It only hides them, only for them to come back stronger. The more you hold them down, the more force they'll push up with when they resurface. The best way to deal with emotions is not by burying them, but by letting them come and go as they need to. It's in acknowledging them that you find peace, not in suppressing them. Light comes from darkness. You can't appreciate the light without knowing the darkness. The things you try to avoid, the struggles you try to escape, are often the very things that lead you to a deeper understanding of who you are. It's in the hard moments, the moments when everything feels heavy, that you discover your true strength. Take fear, for instance. We all have it. We try to push it aside, to act like it doesn't exist. But the more you avoid it, the more it controls you. When you face that fear, when you acknowledge it instead of running from it, something shifts. It loses its power over you. You see it for what it is, not something that defines you, but something you can move through. Grief works the same way. If you try to bypass the sadness, it stays with you in ways you don't expect. It builds walls around you, leaving you disconnected. But when you allow yourself to feel the pain, to sit with it, you start to see the light on the other side. You find healing in the very process of facing what hurts. The darkness isn't something to be feared or avoided. It's the fertile ground where growth happens. By confronting your fears, your pain, and your doubts, you make room for the light to shine through. You can't grow in the light without first understanding the shadows. Only then do you fully realize what you're capable of. Fear loses power when you invite it in. The more you run from it, the more it grows. It starts to control you, sneaking up when you least expect it, making everything seem worse than it really is. But when you stop avoiding it and give it space, something shifts. Fear loses its grip. Take public speaking, for example. The first time you step in front of a crowd, you're filled with fear. You try to push it down, to ignore it. But the more you try to suppress it, the more it takes over. But when you stop fighting it, when you accept that fear is there and choose to move through it, it loses its power. You realize that the fear is just a feeling, not a force stopping you. It works the same with any kind of fear. If you're afraid of failure, the more you avoid taking risks, the bigger that fear becomes. But when you embrace the possibility of failing, when you invite that fear in, it stops controlling you. You take the risk, and whether you succeed or fail, you gain something valuable. Fear doesn't stop you from moving forward. It just becomes part of the process, no longer a barrier, but a reminder that you're growing. Fear isn't something to fight against. It's something to face. Once you do, it loses its power over you. You realize it's just another emotion, and you can move through it with strength and clarity. Healing demands feeling. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. It's easy to want to avoid pain. When something hurts, the first instinct is to push it away, to ignore it, to pretend it's not there. But that doesn't work. When you suppress what you're feeling, it doesn't go away. It just sits there, waiting for the moment when it will surface again, often in stronger, more uncontrollable ways. Think about grief. When someone you love passes, it's natural to feel sadness, anger, or confusion. But if you try to ignore these emotions, if you push them aside because they feel overwhelming, they'll return later, possibly more intense. You might find yourself feeling disconnected from others or unable to move forward. The healing process begins only when you allow yourself to sit with that sadness, to truly feel it without judgment. The same happens with fear. You might be afraid of taking risks or stepping into new situations. If you try to avoid that fear, if you refuse to acknowledge it, it will control you. But when you face the fear, when you let yourself feel the nervousness, the doubt, and the anxiety, it loses its grip. You realize that fear is just a feeling, not a barrier. Healing isn't about avoiding pain. It's about feeling it, understanding it, and then letting it pass. Only then can you move on and find peace. You must feel it to heal it. Tears are strength. Society often tells us that crying is a sign of weakness, a moment when we're unable to handle the pressure. But the truth is, tears are a release, not a surrender. When you cry, you're not falling apart. You're allowing your body and mind to process the emotions that have built up inside. Think of a person who has been holding on to grief for a long time. They've tried to be strong, to keep moving forward, but the weight of the loss is too much to bear. Eventually, the grief breaks through in the form of tears. In that moment, they aren't weak. They're releasing what they've carried, letting go of the pressure that has been building. The tears are a form of strength, a way for the body to let go of what it no longer needs to carry. The same applies to anger or frustration. When you feel a deep sense of injustice or helplessness, you might cry. Those tears don't make you weak. They're your body's way of acknowledging that something is wrong and giving you the space to feel it. Suppressing that anger only holds it in, But allowing yourself to cry can be a way of reclaiming control over your emotions. Tears aren't a sign of losing control. They are the body's natural way of processing and releasing emotions. Crying shows that you're in touch with your feelings and not afraid to face them head-on. It takes strength to feel your emotions fully and allow them to move through you. Freedom hides in emotion. The emotions you avoid are often the ones holding the key to your freedom. It's easy to push away feelings that make you uncomfortable. Fear, sadness, anger. We've all been taught to suppress emotions that seem too much or unwelcome. But the truth is, when you avoid these emotions, you keep yourself trapped. You can't move forward when you're not willing to face what's holding you back. Take fear, for example. You might avoid it by staying in your comfort zone, avoiding risks, or not speaking up when you should. The more you try to avoid that fear, the more it controls you. But when you face it, when you walk toward what scares you, you begin to find freedom. You realize that fear doesn't define you. It's just a feeling, something that passes. On the other side of it, there's growth, confidence, and space to move freely. The same goes for sadness. You may have experienced loss or disappointment, and the natural instinct is to avoid the pain. But when you don't allow yourself to grieve, you carry that weight with you. It shows up in your relationships, your work, and your mental state. When you finally allow yourself to feel the sadness, you release the grip it has on you. You start to feel lighter, freer, because you've stopped running from the emotion that was holding you down. True freedom comes when you stop avoiding and start feeling. Only then can you move through emotions without them controlling you. Contradictions can be true. The idea that truth must be one thing and not the other is a limitation. Sometimes the truth of a situation can seem to contradict itself, yet both sides are valid. Life is full of complexities that don't always fit neatly into one box. You can hold two seemingly opposing truths at once, and both can be real. Take love and hate. People often think of them as opposites, but they're connected in powerful ways. You can love someone deeply and, at the same time, feel intense frustration or anger toward them. Both emotions can be true. Love doesn't eliminate the possibility of conflict or negative feelings. In fact, those feelings may arise because of the closeness of the relationship. Just because there is love doesn't mean there isn't room for complexity and contradiction in that love. Another example is success and failure. Society often teaches us that success means never failing, but true success can involve failure. A person who has failed and learned from it is often more successful than someone who has never faced failure. The failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a part of the journey. Both can be true at the same time. Truth isn't always simple or straightforward. It can include contradictions and still hold its value. Recognizing this allows for a deeper understanding of life and the experiences we face. Accepting contradictions can lead to greater clarity. Certainty is a red flag. It's easy to think of certainty as a strength, something that shows confidence and clarity. But in many cases, certainty is simply ignorance in disguise. When someone is absolutely sure of something, without question, it's often because they haven't allowed themselves to consider other possibilities or to question their own assumptions. True understanding comes from being open to doubt, to the idea that what you know might change. Take a person who is certain they know the best way to approach a problem. They might refuse to listen to other ideas or perspectives, convinced their way is the only right way. But by refusing to entertain other viewpoints, they miss out on growth and new insights. Certainty, in this case, limits their ability to adapt or learn. They stop evolving because they believe they already have all the answers. In conversations, certainty often shows up as a wall. When someone is so certain they're right, they stop engaging with the real substance of the issue. They dismiss new information because it doesn't fit their view. This blocks any meaningful dialogue, shutting down the chance for discovery or compromise. The danger of certainty is that it convinces us we have no need for further inquiry. It shuts down curiosity, and with that, it closes doors to learning. Being comfortable with uncertainty, on the other hand, leaves room for growth and understanding. It keeps us open to learning and questioning, which is where real insight happens. To see the big picture, you must zoom into the details. It's easy to get lost in the overall vision, to focus on where you want to end up. But the only way to understand how to get there is by looking closely at the individual pieces. You can't build something without first knowing the components. Each detail, no matter how small, plays a role in shaping the larger outcome. Think about a puzzle. At first glance, it might look like an overwhelming mass of pieces with no clear direction. But if you start with just a few pieces, you begin to see where they fit. Once you connect the edges, the picture starts to come together. The same principle applies to any project, whether it's work-related, personal, or creative. When you focus on the small tasks, the steps, and the nuances, the larger vision starts to take shape. A writer may have a broad idea for a story, but needs to dive into the specifics of character, setting, and plot before the full story can be realized. An architect starts with small sketches, designing individual rooms and structures before seeing the entire building. The attention to detail leads to a clearer overall vision. When you zoom in, you stop rushing. You begin to see what works, what doesn't, and what needs adjustment. It's only by understanding the details that you can see how they fit into the bigger picture. Without that focus, the big picture remains unclear and progress is lost in the fog of generalization. Clarity often comes after confusion. When you're faced with a difficult problem or decision, the first reaction is usually confusion. You don't know which way to turn, and nothing seems to make sense. This confusion can feel uncomfortable, but it's a necessary step toward understanding. It's in the messy, unclear moments that the seeds of clarity are planted. Take learning a new skill. At first, it feels overwhelming. Every step seems difficult, and you can't see how it all fits together. The confusion makes you question if you'll ever get it. But as you continue, you work through the confusion. You break down the steps, you practice, and slowly the pieces start to align. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. You begin to see the whole picture. Not because it was always there, but because you've moved through the uncertainty and allowed understanding to form. This happens in conversations too. Sometimes, two people don't agree, and the conversation feels stuck. There's confusion about the point of view, about the intentions. But when you sit with that confusion, ask more questions, and listen deeper, the misunderstanding clears. The conversation opens up, and suddenly, clarity emerges, often in the form of compromise or new understanding. Confusion is not a dead end. It's a part of the process. It's the space where clarity grows, often when you least expect it. When you stop rushing through the confusion and allow yourself to experience it, that's when the answers come into focus. Believing in nothing is still a belief. Some people claim they don't believe in anything, that they have no faith or no specific principles. But the truth is, that stance itself is a form of belief. Choosing not to believe in something still requires an acceptance of the idea that belief itself doesn't matter. It's an active decision to reject belief, and in that rejection, you form your own belief. For example, someone might say they don't believe in religion or spirituality. They believe in nothing. But in saying that, they've created a belief system based on skepticism or atheism. Their belief is that there is no higher power or meaning. In rejecting one set of ideas, they are still embracing another. Their belief in nothing shapes the way they see the world and respond to life's challenges. Even in practical terms, rejecting structure or guidance in favor of total independence is still a belief system. It's the belief that no authority, system, or set of rules should dictate life. It's a firm stance on freedom and self-reliance, even if it's rejecting what others might value. This idea applies to anyone who says they don't trust anything or anyone. In choosing not to trust, you're still adhering to the belief that trust is unnecessary or unwise. You might think you're free from belief, but in reality, your choice to reject belief is just another form of it. Even in nothingness, there's something to believe in. Wisdom is knowing when to be silent. It's not always about what you say, but when you choose to speak. In many situations, silence holds more power than words. Often, the best thing you can do is hold back and listen, rather than rush in with advice or opinions. Take a conversation where someone is venting about their problems. They might not be looking for solutions. They're simply seeking a space to express themselves. If you rush to offer advice or fix the situation, you might miss the point. Sometimes, simply sitting in silence, acknowledging their feelings, and allowing them to speak without interruption is the most valuable response. It shows understanding and respect for their experience, without trying to control the conversation. In moments of conflict, silence can be even more powerful. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment and say something you'll regret. But when you pause, take a breath, and choose not to respond immediately, you give yourself time to think. You allow the situation to cool down and prevent making things worse with hasty words. Knowing when not to speak is a sign of self-control and insight. It's about understanding that sometimes less is more. Your words can have weight, but silence can carry just as much meaning. Wisdom isn't always about what you say. It's about recognizing when to say nothing at all. Answers birth questions. The more answers you find, the more questions arise. It's a cycle that never quite ends. You might think that getting the answer will solve everything, but often it just opens the door to something new. When you find one answer, you see that there's more to explore, more to understand. Take science, for example. Every time a discovery is made, it answers a question, but it often leads to more questions. The discovery of DNA gave scientists answers about how genetics work, but it also opened up questions about how genes influence behavior, how they interact with the environment, and how they can be altered. The more you know, the more you realize how much is still unknown. The same happens in personal growth. When you learn something new about yourself, it often raises new questions. You might figure out why you react a certain way in stressful situations, but then you might start to ask, how can I change that reaction? Or, what is the root of this behavior? The answers lead you down a path of deeper self-discovery, where each answer brings more layers of questions to explore. It's easy to think that having all the answers will bring clarity, but in reality, answers often create more curiosity. They lead to new avenues of exploration, new insights, and more growth. The key isn't to stop asking questions. It's to embrace them as part of the process of learning and understanding. The truth often hides in plain sight. It's easy to overlook something that's right in front of you simply because you're looking for something more complicated or obscure. Sometimes, the most obvious answers are the hardest to see because they're so simple. You might spend days, even weeks, searching for a solution, only to realize later that the answer was there all along. Take a problem at work. You might be caught up in finding a complex solution if diving into deep research or overthinking the situation. But sometimes the answer is simple. Ask the right question, listen carefully, or step back to see the bigger picture. The obvious solution is often the one you've been too focused to notice, buried under layers of unnecessary complexity. This happens in relationships too. You may wonder why there's tension or distance between you and someone close. The truth might be clear. Communication has broken down or needs haven't been voiced. But instead of seeing it, you start searching for deeper issues, making things more complicated than they need to be. The solution is often right there in the most basic actions: talking openly, being present, and listening. The truth doesn't always need to be discovered. Sometimes it's already clear, right in front of you. It's not about finding it somewhere else. It's about stopping and allowing yourself to see what's always been there. Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens. It's easy to get caught up in the urge to share what you know. When you have information, you want to give it, to offer it to others as a way of showing what you've learned. But true wisdom isn't about talking. It's about listening deeply to what's being said, to what's not being said, and to the silence between the words. Consider a conversation where someone is sharing a problem. Knowledge might prompt you to jump in with a solution right away, eager to offer advice. But wisdom listens first. It takes in the full story, paying attention to the emotions, the context, and the unspoken thoughts behind the words. By listening deeply, you not only understand the problem more clearly, but you also create space for the other person to discover their own insights. In work settings, it's the same. Someone who listens to the team, who takes time to understand different perspectives, often finds more creative solutions than someone who assumes they have all the answers. Knowledge might tell you what's likely to work, but wisdom listens to the subtleties of the situation, finding answers that are more fitting, more thoughtful. Listening allows you to see beyond your own perspective. It allows you to understand others more fully, and in doing so, it enriches your own thinking. Wisdom isn't just about what you know, it's about knowing when to stop talking and start listening. That's where true understanding begins. Facts can be true, but still not tell the truth. A fact is simply information, something that can be verified, but that doesn't mean it gives you the full picture. You can have all the facts and still miss the deeper reality of a situation. The truth often goes beyond what is simply stated. It's about understanding the context, the nuances, and the meaning behind the facts. Take a historical event, for example. You might know the date and place of a battle, the number of soldiers involved, and the outcome. Those are facts. They are true in the sense that they can be verified. But the truth of that battle, what it meant for the people involved, how it changed lives, or the emotional cost, isn't captured in those facts alone. The real truth comes from understanding the human experience behind the numbers and dates. This happens in everyday life as well. A person might tell you, "I was late because of traffic." That's a fact. But the truth might be that they didn't leave enough time to account for the traffic, or they were distracted and didn't plan well. The fact doesn't always explain the full story, the motivations, or the bigger picture. Facts are useful, but they don't tell the whole truth. To understand the truth, you must look beyond the surface, dig deeper, and consider the broader context that the facts might leave out. You must accept the situation fully before you can change it. It's easy to look at a problem and want to fix it right away. We often rush to change things without first acknowledging what is. But real change doesn't happen by ignoring the reality of a situation. It happens when you fully accept it. Only then can you begin to see what needs to shift. Take a person struggling with a job they don't enjoy. They might complain about their work day after day, wishing for change, but until they fully accept their current position, until they stop pretending it's something it isn't, they can't take the steps needed to improve their situation. They may want to leave, but they need to first accept that they are in this job now, that this moment is part of their journey. Once they acknowledge this, they can make a plan, set goals, and take action toward finding something better. But without acceptance, they're stuck in resistance, and that keeps them in a loop of dissatisfaction without movement. This happens in personal growth as well. You might want to change a behavior, like being more patient or learning to listen better, but until you accept that you struggle with these things, you can't truly improve. Denying the issue keeps you from addressing it. Acceptance doesn't mean liking the situation. It means being honest about where you are so you can make the choices necessary for transformation. Sometimes, the most powerful action is non-action. In a world that values constant movement and productivity, stillness often feels counterintuitive. We're taught to keep pushing, keep hustling, always do more. But true power doesn't always come from doing. Sometimes it comes from pausing, stepping back, and allowing things to unfold on their own. Take a leader in a crisis. Often the instinct is to act immediately, make decisions, take charge, push everyone forward. But there's a moment when the most effective response is to remain calm and silent, to allow the situation to settle and reveal the next steps. In that stillness, the leader observes, listens, and gathers the information needed to make a more informed, thoughtful decision. By not rushing in, they create space for clarity. In personal life, stillness can be just as powerful. When facing a difficult decision, the urge is to act fast, to resolve the issue immediately. But sometimes, sitting with the uncertainty allows your mind to quiet and see things more clearly. The pressure to do something can cloud judgment. Non-action gives you the time and space to process your thoughts fully before taking the next step. Stillness is not weakness. It's the ability to control your impulses, to trust that not every problem needs immediate action. Sometimes pausing and letting things be is the most effective form of strength. In those moments, you move with intention, not reaction. To change the world, you must stop trying to control it. The more you try to control situations, people, or outcomes, the more you limit your ability to make real change. Control creates resistance. It forces things into a shape that may not fit. And when things don't go as planned, frustration and conflict take over. True change happens when you let go of the need to control and allow things to unfold naturally. Think about a leader who tries to micromanage every part of a team. The more they control, the less the team members feel empowered to make decisions or contribute. They follow orders, but they don't bring new ideas or take initiative. Real progress happens when leaders trust their teams, allowing them to grow and make choices. By letting go of control, they create space for innovation and ownership. The same happens in personal life. When you try to force outcomes, whether it's in a relationship, a career, or your personal goals, you often push people or situations away. Trying to control makes things rigid. But when you let go, when you stop needing everything to go your way, you open up to the possibilities. Things flow more naturally, and you're more likely to experience growth, not because you forced it, but because you've allowed it to happen. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means having enough trust to let things evolve in their own time. It's in that freedom that real, lasting change takes place. Small, consistent steps lead to the biggest transformations. It's easy to think that change requires a dramatic shift, that you need a big leap or sudden breakthrough to see real progress. But the most lasting transformations often come from the small, everyday actions that add up over time. These steps might seem insignificant in the moment, but they accumulate and eventually lead to something much larger. For example, someone who wants to get fit might think they need to start by running 5 miles every day. That approach can be overwhelming and hard to maintain. But if they start by walking for 10 minutes a day, then gradually increase the time and intensity, the change will be much more sustainable. Over weeks and months, those small steps build into a bigger shift in health and fitness. The key isn't the size of the step, but the consistency in taking it. In personal growth, the same principle applies. A person trying to improve their mindset doesn't have to change everything overnight. They can start by reading for 5 minutes each day, practicing gratitude, or setting a small goal. The more consistently they do this, the more their mindset will shift. Over time, these small actions lead to bigger changes in how they see themselves and the world around them. Small moves may seem slow, but they are the foundation for big shifts. It's the consistency that creates real, lasting transformation. In surrendering, you take your power back. It sounds counterintuitive because we often think of power as something we must fight for, something we have to control. But true power isn't about forcing your way through life. It's about accepting what you cannot change and choosing to move with it, not against it. Imagine a situation where you're stuck in a difficult conflict. You might try to control the other person, push your point of view, or hold on tightly to your version of the truth. The more you try to control, the more the situation slips from your grasp. But when you surrender, when you let go of needing to win or prove yourself, you free yourself from the struggle. You stop fighting and start listening. In that moment, you regain control over yourself, your emotions, and your actions. You stop letting the situation dictate your responses. Instead, you make choices from a place of calm, not reaction. This applies in personal growth as well. You might be facing a deep fear or doubt. You try to control it, push it away, or ignore it. But the more you resist, the stronger it becomes. When you surrender to that fear, when you accept it as part of your experience, it no longer has power over you. You see it for what it is, a feeling that you can acknowledge without letting it define you. Surrender isn't weakness. It's the ultimate form of strength. Because in surrendering, you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, and in doing so, you find true power. You can't change what you won't confront. Change starts with honesty. You can't fix a problem you refuse to acknowledge, whether it's something within yourself or in your life. Avoidance only prolongs the issue, and the longer you run from it, the harder it becomes to face. Take a person who's unhappy in their job. They might complain to others about their dissatisfaction, but they avoid confronting the real reasons behind it. They might not want to admit to themselves that they're afraid of change or that they've outgrown the role. As long as they avoid that honest confrontation, the unhappiness continues. It's only when they confront the reality of their situation, whether it's fear, lack of growth, or a misalignment of values, that they can begin to take action and make a change. This applies in relationships too. If there are unresolved issues between two people, pretending they don't exist or avoiding difficult conversations only creates more tension. The relationship won't improve until both people are willing to confront the issues, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel. Only then can they address the root cause and move forward with clarity and understanding. Confronting something doesn't mean attacking it. It means being honest with yourself and facing the truth, no matter how difficult. When you confront what needs to change, you open the door for transformation. Without that confrontation, nothing shifts. Real change often feels like falling apart. The process of transformation isn't always smooth or comfortable. It can feel as if everything is unraveling, as if you're losing control. But in reality, this breakdown is often the first step towards something better. Think about someone who is going through a difficult personal change, like ending a relationship. At first, it feels like everything is falling apart. The future they imagined with that person is gone, and the pain feels overwhelming. But as time goes on, they start to see things differently. The breakdown of that relationship opens the door to a new version of themselves. They gain clarity, independence, and a deeper understanding of what they truly want. This happens in professional life as well. A person might lose a job or face a career setback. In the moment, it feels like failure, like everything is falling apart. But when they allow themselves to go through the discomfort and confusion, they often discover new opportunities, new paths they never considered before. The breakdown is simply the old structure giving way to something that can grow stronger and more aligned with their true purpose. Real change doesn't always feel like a smooth progression. It often feels like chaos, a shattering of the old way of thinking or being. But once you allow yourself to experience that breakdown, you find the space for a breakthrough. Only by letting yourself fall apart can you rebuild in a way that's stronger and more aligned with who you're becoming. Doing less with intention accomplishes more than doing more without clarity. It's easy to think that being busy means being productive, but often the opposite is true. When you focus on the right tasks with clear intention, you make real progress. It's not about how much you do, it's about doing the right things with purpose. For example, someone working on a project might rush through tasks, thinking that checking off every item on the to-do list is the key to success. But without clear focus, they're just moving through the motions. They may finish the tasks, but the result might not be effective or impactful. On the other hand, someone who takes the time to plan, to consider what matters most, will accomplish more with less effort. They focus on the actions that bring the greatest results, and because of that, their work has more value. In personal growth, this principle holds true as well. You might try to make huge changes all at once, take on several new habits, start a new project, or fix multiple problems. But without focus, the energy gets scattered. When you slow down and focus on one thing at a time, with clarity about why it matters, the change happens more smoothly and meaningfully. Intentional actions, even if fewer in number, will always outweigh scattered, aimless efforts. The power is in the purpose behind what you do. When you act with intention, you accomplish more with less. You must stop trying to be better to realize you already are. Constantly striving to improve, to become more, can make you lose sight of who you already are. In the pursuit of becoming better, you overlook the value of the person you are right now. The truth is, you are already enough. Take, for example, a person who is always working to be more successful. They push themselves to work harder, achieve more, and constantly measure their worth by what they've done. They never stop to appreciate their own growth because they're too focused on what's next. But in this constant drive, they miss the present moment. They forget that the qualities they seek, patience, resilience, discipline, are already in them. They've just been too busy chasing the next goal to notice. In relationships, the same applies. You might feel like you're not enough for someone, always trying to change or improve to meet their expectations. But the truth is, you are already worthy of love and respect just as you are. When you stop trying to be someone else, when you stop constantly striving to be better, you begin to accept the person you are. You become more grounded in your own value. Realizing you are enough doesn't mean you stop growing. It means that growth comes from a place of self-acceptance. When you stop trying to be better, you free yourself to embrace your full potential and live in the moment, without the pressure to be more than what you already are. The biggest shift happens when nothing on the outside changes, but everything inside does. It's easy to think that change requires external circumstances to shift. We often wait for the right opportunity, the right job, or the perfect situation to create change. But the most powerful transformations occur within. When you change how you think, how you feel, and how you see the world, everything around you begins to look different, even if nothing on the outside has changed. For example, consider someone who is struggling with stress at work. They might want a new job or a different environment, thinking that will solve the problem. But when they shift their mindset, when they stop seeing their work as a source of stress and start approaching it with more calm or focus, the situation itself changes. The workload may remain the same, but their experience of it becomes more manageable. They realize that the pressure they felt wasn't caused by the job itself, but by how they were responding to it. This happens in personal relationships as well. A person might feel misunderstood or disconnected from those around them, but when they change how they communicate, how they listen, and how they approach conflict, the dynamics shift. The people around them may not change, but their perspective and interactions do, creating a sense of connection and understanding. The power of inner change is that it gives you control over your experience. When you shift your inner world, your outer world begins to reflect it, even if the external circumstances remain the same.